February 1st, 1959. The wind howled through the Ural Mountains, whispering secrets through the barren trees. Snow-covered peaks loomed over the frozen landscape, casting long shadows under the pale light of the moon. The cold was merciless, an unrelenting force that had claimed many lives before. Yet, on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead, 9 hikers set up camp, blissfully unaware that this night would be their last. The journey of the Dyatlov group began not on the slopes of the Urals, but in the halls of the Ural Polytechnic Institute, where students bustled between classes and lectures, filling the air with eager conversations about engineering, physics, and mathematics. Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the expedition, stood before a map, his eyes scanning the familiar routes he had carefully planned. The trip to Otorten was more than just an adventure. It was a test of skill, endurance, and the very limits of human capability against nature's brutal force. "Are you sure about this, Igor?" Zinaida Kolmogorova asked, folding her arms as she peered over his shoulder. "The weather reports say the temperatures could drop lower than expected. Maybe we should wait." Igor smiled, shaking his head. "You know me, Zina. If we waited for the perfect conditions, we'd never go anywhere. The mountain is there, and we are ready." Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov was a 23-year-old engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute and the leader of the ill-fated Dyatlov Pass expedition. Known for his intelligence, discipline, and strong leadership abilities, Dyatlov was an experienced outdoorsman who had led several previous hiking and skiing trips into the harsh Siberian wilderness. Born in 1936 in the Soviet Union, Dyatlov was passionate about engineering and innovation. He was particularly skilled in radio technology and often built his own devices, including a homemade radio that he brought on expeditions. His meticulous nature made him an excellent planner, and he took great care in organizing the February 1959 trek through the Ural Mountains. Dyatlov's ambition was to earn the highest certification in Soviet hiking, grade 3, by completing this challenging journey. His leadership was well respected among his fellow students, and those who joined the expedition trusted him implicitly. Zina sighed, but didn't argue further. She knew Igor too well. He was methodical, precise, and above all, determined. If he said they were going, they were going. A radio engineering student, Zina, was known for her kind and determined nature. She had experience with previous expeditions and was highly respected by her peers. She was particularly close to Igor Dyatlov, and some suspect there may have been romantic feelings between them. In her journal, she expressed concerns about the harsh conditions but remained optimistic. The team of 9 had been carefully selected based on experience and physical ability. Each had their own reason for embarking on the trek, and each carried their own expectations and fears. Yuri Krivonishenko, the group's joker, sat on a bench tuning his mandolin. "You know," he mused, strumming a playful chord, "we should write a song about this expedition, something grand, something heroic. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be famous for it." Yuri was an outgoing, humorous individual who often entertained the group with his mandolin and stories. Lyudmila Dubinina smirked. "Or we'll freeze to death, and no one will ever hear it." A strong-willed and outspoken student, Lyudmila was studying engineering and was known for her resilience and toughness. She had been on difficult hikes before and had a deep love for the outdoors. However, she had suffered a gunshot wound in a previous expedition when a hunter accidentally shot her, an experience that had hardened her. Yuri laughed, shaking his head. "Always the optimist, Lyuda." Rustem Slobodin adjusted his boots. "Let's just focus on getting there first, before we start composing ballads. Rustem was an athlete and skilled hiker, known for his calm demeanor and athleticism. He was studying engineering and had participated in numerous winter treks before. As the group finalized their preparations, excitement and nervous energy filled the air. They departed on January 23, 1959, by train, heading toward their launch point in the Ural Mountains. The ride was long but filled with laughter and conversation. They shared their dreams, their worries, and their excitement for the challenge ahead. In their journals, they documented their optimism. "We will return stronger than ever. The mountain will test us, but we will conquer it." Igor Dyatlov. "The cold bites, but so do we. I wouldn't trade this for anything." Zinaida Kolmogorova. Upon arriving at the base of the trek, they encountered a local Mansi hunter. He was an older man, weathered by years of survival in the harsh terrain. "Kholat Shakal is not kind," he warned them. "The spirits of the mountains do not welcome strangers." Alexander Kolovatov chuckled. "Spirits, huh? I think we'll be fine, old man. We've got the best gear and the best team." A reserved and highly intelligent individual, Alexander was studying nuclear physics and was deeply interested in research. He was methodical and precise in everything he did. The hunter shook his head. "You may have your science and your maps, but the mountain has its own rules. Be careful." With that cryptic warning, they continued onward, dismissing the superstitions. The group ascended into the wilderness, pushing through the biting cold. Spirits were high, despite the challenges ahead. But as the wind whispered through the trees, an unseen force seemed to watch their every step. By February 1st, the group had pushed further into the depths of the Urals, the biting cold growing more relentless with each passing day. They had reached the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a place known by the local Mansi people as the Mountain of the Dead. To an outsider, the name might seem ominous, but to Dyatlov's group, it was merely another challenge to be overcome. The decision to set up camp on an exposed ridge was a calculated one. Dyatlov, ever the meticulous leader, wanted to prepare his team for extreme conditions. There was a more sheltered area in the nearby forest, but he chose the ridge to simulate the harsher, more dangerous conditions they might face in future expeditions. It was a challenge, one that would push their endurance to its limits. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the team worked together to pitch their tent, driving stakes into the frozen ground and securing the canvas against the howling wind. Snow crunched under their boots, and their breath hung in the frigid air like ghostly wisps. Yuri Doroshenko clapped his hands together for warmth. "This cold is no joke. I can't feel my fingers." Yuri was known for his bravery. In an earlier incident, he once confronted a bear to protect his friends. He was a strong-willed and passionate individual who was dedicated to hiking. "That's because you keep taking your gloves off like an idiot," Nikolai Thibault Brignol teased, passing him a cup of hot tea. "Drink this. It'll help." Nikolai was known for his charm and confidence. He came from a family of French descent and had a strong academic background. Zinaida Kolmogorova sat on her sleeping bag, writing in her journal. She looked up and smiled. "Despite the cold, I have to admit, there's something beautiful about this place. The way the moonlight hits the snow, the way the trees sway in the wind. It's haunting." Lyudmila Dubinina nodded. "It does feel different, almost like we're being watched." "Oh, don't start with that," Rustem Slobodin groaned. "First the Mansi spirits, now ghosts. Next thing you'll be saying, there's a yeti lurking in the woods." "Hey, Don't joke, Yuri Krivonishenko interjected, lowering his voice. There are stories, you know. Big, dark creatures seen in these mountains. The locals say they aren't just legends. Igor Dyatlov chuckled, shaking his head. All right, enough ghost stories. Get some rest, everyone. We have a long day ahead of us. Despite the laughter and camaraderie, an unease settled over the camp as the night deepened. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie wailing sound that sent chills down their spines. As the group settled into their tent, unaware of what awaited them, something stirred in the darkness beyond the tree line. A shadow moved, tall, indistinct, almost blending with the night. A camera clicked in the distance. A blurry photo would later be found, depicting a figure standing just at the edge of the forest, watching. Something was out there. The tent rustled against the fierce mountain winds, its fabric groaning under the relentless pressure of the storm. The hikers, exhausted from the day's trek, had burrowed into their sleeping bags, seeking whatever warmth they could find. The temperature had plummeted well below freezing, and even the layers of wool and down provided little comfort against the biting cold. Zenaida stirred, her breath visible in the dim lantern light. "Does anyone else hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Rustem groaned, shifting in his bag. "Hear what?" "A sound. Like footsteps." Yuri Krivonishenko chuckled sleepily. "It's probably the wind playing tricks on you. Or the Yeti you've been waiting for." But Zenaida didn't laugh. She strained her ears, listening past the howling gusts. And then, there it was. A crunching sound, deliberate and slow, moving just beyond the tent. Her heart pounded. Someone's out there. Igor, always the leader, sat up and rubbed his face. "All right, let's check it out." Reluctantly, a few of them untangled themselves from their sleeping bags. Yuri Doroshenko grabbed a flashlight and unzipped the tent, poking his head out into the icy darkness. The wind was a relentless force, sending flurries of snow into his face. "See anything?" Igor asked. Yuri swept the beam of light across the empty white expanse. At first, there was nothing, just endless snow and the skeletal outline of distant trees. Then, the beam caught something. Footprints. Fresh, deep footprints leading away from the tent. "Guys," Yuri whispered, "someone's been here." A wave of unease settled over the group. The nearest settlement was miles away, and they were the only people known to be in this area. No one should be out here. Then, the sound came again, closer this time. A crunch. A slow, deliberate crunch. The group exchanged nervous glances. The wind howled louder, almost as if it were trying to drown out whatever was lurking in the darkness. "We should stay inside," Lyudmila said, her voice tense. "Whatever it is, we don't want to attract it." Igor hesitated, glancing at the tracks again. Then he nodded. "All right, everyone, get inside. Zip the tent tight." One by one, they retreated back into their sleeping bags, listening, waiting. The wind continued its relentless wailing, but the footsteps, if that's what they were, seemed to have stopped. For a while, no one spoke. No one moved. They just lay there, staring into the darkness, waiting for morning to come. But morning would never come for them, because something had already found them. The night was colder than any before. The wind cut through the fabric of the tent like icy blades, making the hikers huddle closer together for warmth. Outside, the snow swirled in chaotic patterns, the darkness beyond the ridge swallowing the landscape in a void of silence and shadows. Then it began, a distant, Low-frequency sound echoed across the ridge, almost like a deep hum, unnatural and rhythmic. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the mountain. Zenaida stirred first, blinking groggily. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Igor was already awake, sitting up. His expression was tense. "Yes, everyone, stay quiet." The sound grew louder, a throbbing pulse that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. The air felt charged, as if a thunderstorm was about to erupt, but the sky remained clear. Then, a sudden flash of light illuminated the tent, a strange, bluish-white glow casting eerie shadows on the canvas walls. "That's not lightning," Rustam muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Shh," Igor cautioned, straining to listen. Then someone screamed. It was Lyudmila. She sat bolt upright, her eyes wide with terror. "There's something out there," she gasped. The others scrambled awake, their breath coming in short bursts of fog in the frigid air. "What do you mean?" Yuri Krivonishenko started, but before he could finish, the tent shook violently. A chorus of gasps filled the confined space. "Is it the wind?" Nikolai Thibault-Brignol asked, though his voice lacked conviction. The tent shook again, harder this time. Snow tumbled from its edges, and a deep, guttural sound, almost like a growl, reverberated through the night. "We need to see what's happening," Igor said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his gut. "No," Zenaida hissed, grabbing his arm. "If we go out there, we don't know what we're stepping into." Another flash of light, closer this time. A terrible sensation washed over them all. It was an indescribable feeling, as if their bodies had suddenly become weightless, their senses distorted. A high-pitched ringing invaded their ears. I can't move," Rustam gasped, clutching at his head. "Everyone, stay together," Igor commanded, fighting against the dizziness overtaking him. Then, the temperature inside the tent dropped dramatically. A chill unlike anything they had felt before wrapped around them, tightening like an unseen grip. Outside, shadows moved. Then came the final sound, the sound that would send them all scrambling for their lives. A deep, resonating roar split the night, an unearthly wail that shook them to their core. It was neither human nor animal, and it came from just beyond the tent. Something was waiting for them in the snow. The scream cut through the stillness like a blade, jolting everyone into motion. It was a raw, guttural cry, not of fear, but of pure, unfiltered terror. Lyudmila Dubinina clutched her blanket to her chest, her eyes wide with panic. "Who screamed?" Igor demanded, his voice hoarse. "It was me," Zenaida admitted, panting. I thought I saw something outside." The tent, now deadly silent except for their rapid breathing, felt like a coffin. They all sat frozen, waiting for something, anything, to explain what was happening. Then came the second sound, a deep, resonating hum pulsing through the night. It wasn't natural. It didn't belong in the mountains. It was low, vibrating, sending an eerie sensation through their bodies as if their bones were being rattled. Rustam Slobodin reached for his boots with trembling fingers. "What the hell is that?" Igor unzipped his sleeping bag, eyes scanning the tent's canvas. "It's coming from outside." Another flash of blue-white light seared through the tent, casting their frightened faces in stark relief. Then, a noise, low, guttural, like a growl, rumbled through the night. Zenaida gripped Igor's arm. We need to get out of here. Wait, Alexander Kolovatov whispered. We don't know what's out there. Another sound. Closer. Louder. Like heavy footsteps crunching through the snow. Igor, trying to remain calm, reached for the tent flap. I'll look. No! Lyudmila grabbed his wrist. What if it's... She never finished her sentence. The tent shook violently. Panic erupted. A rip tore through the fabric as someone, maybe Igor, maybe someone else, slashed open the side of the tent with a knife. Out! Get out! The cold was a sudden, brutal slap to the face as they spilled into the night. Snow and wind whipped at their exposed skin. Some of them were barefoot, others half-dressed. There was no time to think about warmth or protection, only survival. They ran. They didn't know where to. Just away. From whatever was waiting in the dark. Weeks passed with no word from the Dyatlov expedition. Concern grew among friends and family members who had expected them to return by February 12th. When the days stretched into weeks with no communication, the Ural Polytechnic Institute organized a search party, initially composed of volunteers, students and teachers alike. Soon, the Soviet military joined the effort, bringing aircraft and professional search and rescue teams. The first discovery was their abandoned tent, found on February 26th. The sight that greeted the search team was disturbing. The tent was half buried in snow, its entrance facing away from the wind. Yet, most unnerving of all, it had been slashed open from the inside. The searchers stood in stunned silence, taking in the scene. The hikers' belongings were still inside, boots, coats, food, and equipment untouched, as if the group had left in a hurry. Why would they cut their way out instead of using the entrance? One of the rescuers murmured, frowning at the ragged slashes in the fabric. Something must have scared them enough to make them flee without their gear, another responded. Footprints led away from the tent, staggering and confused. Some of the tracks showed bare feet, others socks, and only a few in boots. The tracks descended toward the tree line, eventually vanishing beneath fresh snowfall. Following the trail, the searchers made their next grim discovery at the edge of a sparse forest, just over a kilometer from the tent. Beneath a cedar tree lay the frozen bodies of Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They were dressed only in their underwear, their hands covered in burns, as though they had tried desperately to warm themselves by a fire. Charred branches around them suggested they had managed to start a blaze, but the cold had been too powerful an adversary. Nearby, remnants of human skin were found embedded in the bark of the cedar tree, as though one of them had frantically tried to climb it. The rescuers looked up. Broken branches extended several meters above, suggesting someone had scaled the tree in sheer desperation. But why? Further into the snow, a third body was found. Igor Dyatlov himself lay face down, his hands clutching at the frozen ground as if he had been crawling back toward the tent. Not far from him, Zinaida Kolmogorova and Rustem Slobodin were discovered in similar positions, their bodies locked in stiff postures of desperate movement. Slobodin's skull bore a fracture. While not immediately fatal, it suggested he had suffered a blow to the head before succumbing to the cold. The mystery deepened. Weeks passed before the final 4 members of the group were found in May, buried beneath several meters of snow in a ravine. The discovery horrified the search teams. Unlike the others, these bodies bore gruesome injuries. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had suffered severe chest fractures, their ribs shattered with a force likened to a car crash. Alexander Kolovatov had a deformed neck, and Dubinina was missing her tongue and parts of her lips. No external wounds, a forensic investigator noted, puzzled. The force required to break ribs like this, it's as if they were struck by something immense, yet there are no signs of impact from a weapon or fall. Adding to the bizarre nature of the case, traces of radiation were found on some of the hikers' clothing. Theories ran wild. Avalanche, military testing, even supernatural or extraterrestrial interference. But no single explanation accounted for all the oddities. The tent slashed open from the inside, the missing clothing, the burns, the severe but invisible trauma, and the mysterious radiation. As the wind howled through the pines of the Dyatlov Pass, it seemed to carry with it the whispers of the 9 lost souls, forever bound to the icy wilderness. As the chilling details of the Dyatlov Pass tragedy unfolded, experts, investigators, and conspiracy theorists alike scrambled to piece together what could have caused 9 experienced hikers to flee into the deadly cold without adequate protection. Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged, some grounded in science, others steeped in speculation. Yet, even with exhaustive analysis, no single explanation accounts for all the strange and unsettling elements of the case. One of the earliest and most widely accepted explanations is that an avalanche forced the hikers to flee their tent in panic. Supporters of this theory suggest that a small, delayed avalanche, possibly triggered by the groups cutting into the snow to create their campsite, led to a sudden collapse that made them believe they were in immediate danger. "Picture it," said Sergei Volkov, a geologist called in to review the case years later. A layer of unstable snow above them. The wind picks up, vibrations shift the landscape, and suddenly they hear the ominous rumbling. They have mere seconds to react. They slash open the tent and run. However, problems with the avalanche theory quickly surfaced. The tent remained partially standing when it was found, with no signs of a snowslide powerful enough to injure or bury the hikers. Moreover, there were no obvious signs of trauma on many of the victims consistent with an avalanche's force. The site itself, according to experts, was not steep enough to generate the kind of deadly avalanche needed to justify the hikers' panicked escape. Another scientific explanation points to a rare meteorological phenomenon known as katabatic winds, powerful gravity-driven winds that can rush down a mountain with ferocious intensity. If such winds had suddenly struck the Dyatlov group's campsite, it might have created a noise so terrifying that the hikers believed an avalanche was imminent, prompting them to flee. Dr. Elena Sokolov, a meteorologist who reviewed the case decades later, explained, "These winds can disorient people and create low visibility conditions, making it easy to get lost. If they were suffering from hypothermia-induced confusion, they may not have been able to find their way back." But again, this explanation fails to address the injuries suffered by some of the hikers, particularly those found in the ravine. Many have speculated that the hikers unwittingly stumbled upon a secret Soviet military experiment, perhaps involving parachute mines, supersonic weapons, or nuclear radiation. Supporters of this theory cite the small traces of radiation found on some of the hikers' clothing, as well as reports of strange orange orbs in the sky seen by other witnesses in the region at the time. "I believe they were in the wrong place at the wrong time," said Vasily Petrov, a former Soviet military officer who later spoke about classified weapons testing. "We were testing a variety of experimental weapons in remote locations. If they were exposed to something they shouldn't have seen, that could explain why the government was so quick to close the case." Indeed, official reports seemed rushed, and certain records vanished. Some believe the blunt force trauma suffered by the final 4 hikers was caused by the shock wave of an experimental explosion. not an avalanche or fall. However, there is no concrete evidence proving the military's involvement. For those who seek explanations beyond the natural, the Dyatlov Pass incident is fertile ground for speculation. Some propose that the hikers encountered a Yeti or some other cryptid living in the mountains, citing the so-called Yeti journal entry found in their records. Others believe the Mansi legends of spirits or curses might have played a role. Professor Anton Belinsky, a folklorist specializing in Mansi culture, remarked, "The Mountain of the Dead has long been associated with omens and spirits. To the Mansi, disturbing this land was akin to inviting misfortune. Perhaps the hikers encountered something they couldn't understand." Additionally, some theorists suggest that infrasound, caused by wind patterns moving through the mountains, could have induced panic and hallucinations, driving the hikers into a frenzy. One of the most sensational theories involves unidentified flying objects. Some witnesses, including local residents and fellow hikers miles away, reported seeing strange lights in the sky during the same period. Could the Dyatlov group have encountered something extraterrestrial? There are reports of lights, radiation, and burned trees in the area, said UFO researcher Dmitry Antonov. It's not so far-fetched to think they saw something that terrified them, something beyond human comprehension. However, skeptics argue that these lights could have been flares, military aircraft, or natural celestial phenomena. One of the most controversial and speculative theories surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident is the idea that the hikers unknowingly stumbled into a time rift, an anomaly in the fabric of space-time that transported them into another dimension or a different point in history. While this theory ventures into the realm of science fiction, some anomalies discovered at the site and the nature of the hikers' injuries have fueled speculation that something unnatural may have occurred. Investigators noted several oddities that didn't align with conventional explanations. The hikers fled their tent in extreme panic, leaving behind clothing, supplies, and even shoes in temperatures well below freezing. This irrational behavior suggests they were reacting to something more than just a physical threat. It was as if they had been overcome by an overwhelming force or vision. Additionally, some bodies were found with inexplicable injuries, such as crushed rib cages and fractured skulls, yet no external wounds. The sheer force required to inflict such damage has been compared to that of a car crash. Could the hikers have been exposed to an unknown energy field that distorted physical matter? One of the most baffling aspects of the case was the hikers' last recorded diary entries. They abruptly ended, giving no indication of distress or an impending disaster. Some researchers speculate that the group may have experienced missing time, a phenomenon commonly reported in cases of alleged alien abduction or temporal disturbances. Could they have encountered an invisible force that disrupted their perception of reality? Some suggest that if a time rift opened in the area, the hikers may have been momentarily transported to another place, or even another time, before being violently ejected back into the present. Another curious detail is the presence of partially exposed film rolls found in the hikers' cameras. Some images were overexposed, while others captured eerie, blurred streaks of light against the night sky. Supporters of the time rift theory argue that these could be signs of electromagnetic disturbances associated with temporal anomalies. Furthermore, traces of radiation were detected on some of the hikers' clothing. Official investigations failed to provide a satisfactory explanation for this. If a time rift or dimensional disturbance had opened, could it have emitted some form of radiation, affecting the hikers physically and mentally? Adding to the mystery, some believe the Soviet government was conducting secret experiments in the Ural Mountains at the time. Was Dyatlov Pass the site of a classified military test involving time manipulation or interdimensional travel. Some accounts suggest that the Soviet Union, during the Cold War, explored the possibility of advanced physics experiments, including those related to wormholes or electromagnetic energy fields. If the hikers inadvertently wandered into a test zone, they might have experienced the effects of an experimental device. The sudden panic, confusion, and physical trauma could be side effects of an uncontrolled energy surge. Among the many theories attempting to explain the tragic fate of the Dyatlov group, one of the most chilling is the idea that a Yeti, or an unknown cryptid, was responsible for their deaths. While this theory is often dismissed as folklore, some pieces of evidence found at the scene have kept it alive in the minds of researchers and enthusiasts. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence fueling the Yeti theory is a photograph discovered among the hikers' film rolls. When the search team developed the remaining film from the group's cameras, they found a disturbing image, a large, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the tree line. The figure appeared tall and humanoid, but lacked distinguishable facial features. Its dark shape blended ominously with the surrounding forest, as if watching the hikers from afar. Some skeptics argue that the photograph was merely a blurred image of one of the hikers, taken accidentally in low light. Others, however, insist that it depicts an unknown entity lurking in the wilderness. Given the remoteness of the area and the lack of other human activity, the possibility that someone, or something, was following the group is unsettling. During the search and recovery operation, reports surfaced about unusual tracks in the snow near the campsite. While most footprints were identified as belonging to the hikers, some investigators noted large, deep impressions that did not match any known boot prints. These tracks were said to be significantly larger than a human foot and showed signs of heavy weight pressing into the snow. Though these reports remain unverified, they fueled speculation that the hikers encountered something unnatural in the wilderness. Were they being watched? Did they flee in terror after coming face to face with a towering creature in the night? The idea of a Yeti-like creature in the Ural Mountains is not without precedent. Local Mansi tribes have long spoken of a being known as the Menk, a massive, hairy humanoid that is said to dwell in remote mountain regions. According to folklore, the Menk is territorial and aggressive, attacking those who venture too close to its domain. Some cryptozoologists believe that the hikers may have unknowingly disturbed such a creature, provoking a violent response. The sheer force of the injuries sustained by some of the hikers, fractured skulls and broken ribs without external wounds, has led some to speculate that they were struck by something immensely powerful. Could a massive creature have been responsible for such blunt force trauma? In the decades following the incident, some researchers have revisited the Yeti theory with fresh eyes. In 2014, a Discovery Channel documentary suggested that a Yeti attack was a plausible explanation, citing the mysterious photograph and the presence of unusual tracks. However, mainstream scientists largely dismissed the claim, pointing out that there was no concrete evidence of such a creature existing in the Urals. Still, the idea persists. Some believe that the Soviet government may have covered up the true cause of the hikers' deaths, either to avoid mass hysteria or to prevent further exploration into classified territories. Could the Dyatlov group have encountered a cryptid that authorities wished to keep secret? Whether or not a Yeti was truly responsible for the fate of the Dyatlov hikers remains a matter of speculation. The eerie photograph of the dark figure in the tree line continues to intrigue and disturb those who study the case. Even after decades of investigation, the mystery endures, leaving one chilling question unanswered. To this day, the wind howls over the Ural Mountains, carrying whispers of what might have happened on that fateful night in 1959. and somewhere beneath the snow, the mountain still keeps its secrets. The 2019 Russian investigation and its findings. 60 years after the tragic event, in 2019, the Russian authorities reopened the Dyatlov Pass case in an attempt to put lingering questions to rest. The goal was to apply modern forensic analysis and scientific methodology to determine the most plausible explanation for the hiker's demise. However, rather than solving the mystery, the official findings sparked new debates and skepticism. After months of research, the Russian Prosecutor General's office announced that the most likely cause of the hiker's deaths was a small but powerful avalanche. The report suggested that the hikers had set up their tent on an unstable slope, which, due to snow accumulation and weather conditions, had become vulnerable to a sudden collapse. The investigators proposed that a slab of snow broke loose and struck the tent, prompting the group to cut their way out and flee into the night, fearing another collapse. According to this theory, the hikers, in their panic, ran into the freezing wilderness without adequate clothing. They sought refuge in the forest, where some of them attempted to build a fire to survive. The ones who suffered severe injuries, such as skull fractures and broken ribs, were theorized to have been hit by the force of the avalanche or suffered falls while trying to navigate the steep terrain in the dark. Despite the official avalanche conclusion, alternative explanations continue to thrive in public discourse. Some researchers suspect that secret Soviet military tests were conducted in the area, possibly involving parachute mines or other experimental weapons that inadvertently caused the hikers' deaths. Others point to the possibility of infrasound-induced panic, a natural but rare phenomenon that could have driven the hikers to flee in terror. The cryptid theory also remains a point of fascination, as does the possibility of a classified government cover-up regarding an unknown or experimental technology. The inconsistencies in the final investigation report have only added fuel to the speculation. While the Russian government considers the case closed, independent researchers and Dyatlov Pass enthusiasts continue to scrutinize the evidence. The mystery of what truly happened that night remains unresolved, ensuring that the story of the Dyatlov hikers will persist for generations to come. Whether due to nature, secret military activity, or something beyond human understanding, the tragedy in the Ural Mountains continues to haunt those who seek the truth. The Ural Mountains are steeped in myths and legends, and the Dyatlov Pass incident only adds to their eerie reputation. Was it merely a tragic accident? Or did the hikers experience something beyond human understanding? To this day, the possibility of a temporal disturbance remains an eerie, albeit unproven, explanation for the bizarre events of that night. Whatever the truth may be, the Dyatlov Pass continues to whisper its secrets through the howling winds, waiting for someone to unravel the ultimate mystery of what truly happened to those 9 hikers.